Welcome to the social-engineer.org podcast, the Human Element Series, episode 147. I'm Chris Hadnagy, the founder and CEO of Social Engineer LLC, socialengineer.org, and the Innocent Lives Foundation. And I've been hosting this podcast for way too long, 2009, if you can believe that. I am joined by our awesome guest, which we'll get to in a second, but also my awesome host, Maxie Reynolds.
I am Maxie Reynolds. I am the technical team lead at Social Engineer. I have a background in oil and gas and created my own personal hell by studying quantum computing, and that's about it.
That's it, really? That's all you're going to say?
I don't think we should go any further.
There's no more things you want to talk about, like stunt driver, model?
There was one time.
Actress?
There were some stunts. I got very badly damaged.
Underwater submarine operator. None of that. None of that. A book. How about the book coming out in August? None of that.
I think now's not the time.
Oh, okay. Okay. No, yeah. So, well, anyhow, there's some other stuff. Maxie did some things, and we'll talk about that later, I guess. But let's get to some quick announcements before we get to the awesome part of the show. This episode is sponsored by social-engineer.com. We are your trusted information security company. We specialize in fully managed voice phishing and email phishing programs, as well as many different types of security assessments, all based on the human threat. Security threats are targeting all of our staff. We could just see that now with like what happened in the oil and gas industry just this past couple of weeks. And I'm sure you can't turn the TV on or news without seeing something else get breached. So we offer certified training programs, and we use our own certified social engineers to help you with adversarial simulations that are designed to educate and help your population fight off these attacks. You can find out more information about our services on our website, social-engineer.com. Okay, a couple other quick things. Do you know that we have a Slack channel? There is now close to 1,000 people on this channel every day talking about human behavior, communications, phishing, vishing, pretexting. We got people coming in asking for help with adversarial simulation pretexts, all sorts of different cool things. You could check that out in the show notes. We have a link there for that. Of course, check out Clutch. Hey, guess what, guys? Good news. There's a tour. I know we're still in COVID, but go to pro-rock.com, check out the tour, go see one of their shows. They're amazing. And Neil's on the board of ILF, so we definitely want to support that. Talking of which, check out innocentlivesfoundation.org. Please give us some support there. Check out the things that we're doing to help law enforcement locate, identify, and capture child predators. So you could check out our information there. And last but not least, June 24th, on Thursday, I will be with Living Security. We're going to be at their second annual Breaking Security Awareness Conference. It's a digital conference, so you don't have to worry about travel if you're still not traveling. They have organized this for the cybersecurity industry leaders, so that way we could talk about threat intelligence and other threats that are happening to all of our companies. There's a rapid fire segment devoted to social engineering, which I will be on, and we'll be discussing how those who work from home are specifically targeted by social engineers and the malicious hacking community. You can sign up by going to livingsecurity.com and check out the Breaking Awareness conference there. Okay, now let's get, also in the show notes. It will be in the show notes. Now let's get to the fun part. This month we're joined, you know the name. Come on, you've seen him a million times on the podcast. You've read one of his 14 plus books, or probably more. I got the number wrong. But he's one of my good friends and one of my personal mentors, which I know he loves that title, but it really is true. Joe Navarro. He served in the FBI for 25 years. And then after leaving that, he used his expertise in nonverbal and behavior analysis as now an author, helping the world understand why these things are so important. I did get it right. 14 books in 29 different languages, all dealing with body language, human behavior. You can see a few of them if you're on the YouTube channel right here behind me. There's many of them on display there. His book, What Everybody is Saying, remains one of the #1 best-selling body language books in the world for now over 12 years. And being an author myself, I know how important that is. That's a pretty cool thing to have. And Joe has a new book coming out this month that you're listening to this podcast. It's called Be Exceptional. and it brings all 40 years of his observations and research into this one book. And that's really what we're here to discuss today. Joe, I can't thank you enough for coming back to the show.
Chris, I had no choice. You won't leave me alone.
I know, and I know where you live.
You simply will not leave me alone.
I can't help it. I like you, and when I like people, I tend to be a little aggressive, I guess.
You know, it's funny. You say I mentor you. You forget how much I learned from you. So let's not.
Thank you.
Let's put that weather vane right where it belongs, in the middle.
Well, thank you for that. But I have some stories about, threats and things like that, which we won't talk about in the podcast, but that's okay. So let's talk about this book. Why did, after all the research, all the books you wrote, nonverbals, body language, understanding human communications, why a book about being exceptional? Where did that come from?
Great question. It was one of those things where I had spent, I hate to say it, but going all the way back to the 70s, studying human behavior. And I had been cataloging things all along. And it wasn't till I started writing Dangerous Personalities, and which I know you're familiar with, and and looking at those things, those behaviors and those people that can harm us, that I started to think, wait a minute, what about the people that really stand out, that really are exceptional, that make us feel well, that do things that are pro-social, beneficial, that demonstrate every day ethical behavior, and seem to have this mastery over both themselves and what they exude. And that which they exude is so influential that they don't have to beat their chest. They don't have to drive a fancy car. They don't have to do anything. We just gravitate towards them because of the exquisite nature of how they do certain things. And so with my writing collaborator, Tony Shara Pointer, this goes back to 2006. I said, this is a book that I need to write, because, so much of things are negative, right? A lot of my body language books, we talk about the behaviors of discomfort and so forth. And I wanted something very positive. So started working on it, but, other projects got in the way. And then it was finally time. It was finally time to write it. And when I went to my editor at HarperCollins, he just loved it, because it's not theoretical. It is prescriptive. And if you do this, this will happen. Mm-hmm. And this is what exceptional people do. And so we're very excited for this project, which comes out, as you know, June 29th.
So I have an interesting. I had a thought that I want to know if you had this plan, because you wrote the Dictionary of Body Language, and I remember when that came out, you came on the podcast and we talked about that, and that basically came from you in a notepad over decades, just writing down, oh, I saw this. Let me see if I see this in other people, and then eventually it became a book. And now here you did it again.
There's 11 of these.
By the way, if you tell me where they are in your house, I will safeguard them for you. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. If you ever need someone to hold them,
Is that why you always invite yourself to my
It
house?
is. Especially when you're not at home. I'm looking for them. I mean,
Well, I have to tell you, Maxie has first dibs.
But I'm closer. That's all I got to say.
I'll bring my dog.
Well, she's my math teacher.
I can
Most
teach
people
you
don't
math.
know this. Yeah.
No, you could not. Oh my God.
I can teach you math. I know
Worst at
addition
math.
and subtraction.
No.
I mean-
Maxie knows quantum physics, buddy.
Yeah, but how useful is that? I mean, seriously.
Well, as it happens, very useful.
We found some uses for that.
Anyhow, I had a question.
Yes,
so now
please.
you did it again. So now you took 40 years of observing people and you turned it into a book. So it was both of these books with the dictionary and with Be Exceptional. Did you say to yourself when you started cataloging this stuff, I'm going to write a book out of this? Or did that idea just come after cataloging it all?
You're the first person to ever ask me that. When I retired from the FBI in 2003, I never thought I would write a book. I wasn't a writer. I hadn't written anything. Jack Schaefer, fellow FBI agent, guy I love, got me started in writing these little articles for the FBI law enforcement bulletins. But I mean, it was just bullet points. It wasn't really writing. So to answer your question, no. In a way, without knowing it, I was acting as an ethologist acts. So ethologists go out in the field, like Jane Goodall, sit in the jungle and just watch whatever's going on. And in essence, I was mesmerized by everything that was around me. I was just curious. So I just began to write about it. I mean, I can go back to the first journal entry that I made in the late 60s, where I was looking at, why is it that when birds migrate and they sit on the line, they're equidistant from each other? And, and people do the same thing when they're in line to get on a bus or something. What is it that communicates, hey, 3 feet is fine, 2 feet not fine? And I just started writing these things down with no intention ever of writing. I can tell you that the day I retired from the FBI, I had no intention of writing. And by the way, thank you for mentioning what everybody is saying, which it still remains the #1 book on body language in the world. But here's what's interesting. When that was published, my editor at the time said, Joe, if we get 6 months out of this, we'll be lucky.
12 years later.
And don't get disappointed if the shelf life is 6 months. And I said, I'm content. I wrote what I wanted to write, and there it is. So I think it's just my natural curiosity, and I know you want to get your hands on these notebooks, but no.
I mean, eventually,
Never.
Never.
It can happen. I'm just saying it can happen. I think it can happen.
I have 2 questions for you, Joe. The first is, what is the difference then between, say, excellence and perfection?
Yeah, a great question, Maxie, because, it's interesting. We think that humans seek perfection, and that's actually wrong. Humans seek the penultimate thing that humans seek, and that's one of the items that's covered in the book, is that we seek psychological comfort. Okay. And in all its manifestations, be it enjoying a good book, coffee over tea, a tranquil environment, the perfect music, or our preferences. What are my preferences at any given time? And we don't necessarily need perfection. For a young child, when the mother's not there, the teddy bear will do. When the teddy bear's not there, the blanket will do. Yeah. And if you understand the human brain, you realize, oh yeah, there can be surrogates, and those surrogates that create psychological comfort are powerful. So, why is it that you can have two gas stations in two different corners, and one has a higher price than the other one, but people will go to that one merely because it has more lighting. And it's because it creates psychological comfort. And there are innumerable examples of this fact that the gold standard in now and forever is simply this: whoever provides the most psychological comfort is going to be the soonest winner. Because when everybody has the same information, when everybody has the same, they're offering the same things like seat belts and stuff like that, then you have somebody like Volvo who came out and said, seat belts not good enough. We're going to put airbags in there. And the minute that started, well, let's put three airbags in there.
Yeah.
And now
it's like 97 airbags. Yeah.
7, 8, 9 airbags.
Yeah.
And you say, what is that for? Psychological comfort. People will pay for it. People will gravitate towards it, and people will embrace it. And the minute you realize that, whether you're a salesperson or whatever, that's what really humans seek, not perfection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So excellence is about experience then. It's my experience of the journey that I'm on. So would you say, so for instance, we have sound design for cars. So when you're in a car, you hear certain things depending on the brand. That's a form of excellence. If the sound designer has done it well and I want to get in a Cadillac rather than somebody name another big car.
Yeah, well, now we're talking about preferences, and that whoever meets or matches our preferences. So if I like a certain ride, if I like a certain scent, that's those are things that are going to make us content.
Yeah.
But the book itself, when I talk about being exceptional, it's really about, first and foremost, and you know it from your own life, Maxie and Chris, is you have to have mastery over yourself. You have to have mastery over first of all your emotions, but also mastery over your own education. That we try to outsource education, but in fact many of the most successful people, and certainly all of the people that I studied that are really exceptional, created an apprenticeship for themselves, no matter what life had brought them, and created that world that they could have dominance and control over. And that creates what we call happiness and joy, which is just another term for psychological comfort.
So how does someone get there? Like, let's say someone, without giving all the details of your book, because we want people to go buy it and read it. But, you said getting mastery over your emotions. That's not a common thing we see today. I mean, just, jump on Twitter for 5 minutes and you'll see people don't have a mastery over any of their emotions at all. So what's one or two things people can do to start working on that?
Well, the first thing is you really have to have that self conversation. You need to be introspective and say, what do you have to work on? Do people enjoy being around me, or do I really piss them off? Am I being generous with others, or am I being selfish? There's any number of things, but when we look back, when I look back throughout history, and certainly when I look at in living memory of really exceptional individuals, and again, this has nothing to do with how much you earn or how much property you have. One thing stands out is that no matter what, they rein themselves in so that they could have, you can't control the things around you if you don't have control over yourself. So you have to work on that. And some people will, and I spend, you know, every day working on this. And you may spend a lifetime doing it, but each increment you're going to be better. So you have to have that conversation and then say, well, what do I lack? You know, I always joke that, you know, Maxie teaches me math. Why? Because when I was in high school, I didn't pay attention, you know, and she's patient enough to, you know, to get into algebra and the higher math and stuff. And I know my deficits and I want to learn so that when I apply a formula to something I'm talking about, that I can do it wisely. That's, you know, when Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, talked about finding your bliss, and everybody said, oh, find your bliss, find your bliss. You know, he didn't say you go and sit on a chair and it comes to you. What he was saying was identify what that bliss is. Now go out and do everything that needs to be done to achieve that. Create your own apprenticeship, whether you do it through the internet or a library or through mentors, but create that and you will have your bliss, but only you can do that. And the problem today is that I see is a lot of people expected to just land on them.
Yeah.
And this is something that's not taught. You have to create the scaffolding that will support you, not just throughout your life, but through your life's ambition. What do you want to do?
I want to take it a step back even further then, right? Because you're saying that we, to get to that first part, to basically question ourselves about our deficit, we need a level of self-awareness. And it seems like from what you're saying, we need a level of humility, because we're also having to look at that and being willing to say, I kind of stink right here and I need to fix that, or that's going to hurt my life. So how do people get that when I agree with you, like what you said, that's not being taught. You know, now I have a chance to teach at a university, and fortunately my students weren't like this, but I've seen it in universities where they almost feel this entitlement. Well, I'm here to get this degree, so I'm entitled to this. I built it, it will come, right? How do you get people to get this self-awareness piece and that humility that's going to allow them to do that first stage you talked about?
Well, that's why I start with self-mastery, because if you can't do that, you can't go any, why it's like the Navy SEALs. Why do these lethal killers have to make their bed every day to perfection? Because if you can't do that right, you're not going to be able to do other things. And you're right. Students nowadays say, well, I paid to attend, so I attended, so therefore I'm entitled to get an A and to graduate. When I was learning to write, and you know how hard that is, I had to learn that those words, they may look good to me, but to an editor, it may not cut the mustard. And I had to learn to be humble and say, you know what, I really don't know a lot about writing. It's time to learn. But self-mastery, if we take the time to do that, and we can do it by looking at someone, what we call modeling. Take someone and says, what do I like about them? I like them because they're humble. I like them because they're caring. I like them because of this and that. Take those positive traits from others. I like this person because every morning he's out here running and then I see him at night, he's walking with the kids or he's reading a book, whatever that is, model it. And then I talk in the book about how we can literally shape our minds through this process called myelination, where just like athletes, they perfect a movement. You can perfect behaviors so that they become robust. They are myelinated to the point where now, when you perform them better.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the gift. When under stress, when things are falling apart, they don't let you down. And that's where a lot of people fall apart, because they don't have that scaffolding. They don't have that support. So we start with that. And then we go to that other area, which is, how do we observe the world? I know you've always been curious about that. How does Joe Navarro see the world, and what do I decode for? And that is particularly essential to be exceptional. And interestingly enough, that is in no business school,
Right.
and yet that is an absolute requirement for successful engagement of others, number one, and number two, for innovation. You can't innovate if you can't observe.
Mm-hmm. So I loved the point you made a few moments ago about how the achievement of being exceptional is not related to the amount of money or property or the car you get. I love that, because I think so many times we equate success at something with a possession that proves I have success. My house is big, so I must be successful, right? Well, no, maybe I'm in $1 billion of debt, so it doesn't mean I'm successful. So what is the ranking of success then? If it is not a possession or a thing, how does someone say, you know what, I'm on my path to being exceptional?
Well, let's not equate success with being exceptional. Being exceptional, in the end, if I can borrow from, well, it is simply this. In the end, all we are is the sum total of our influence on others. That's all we are. This is Carl Sagan's admonition. It's not who we say we are. It's not who we think we are. It's what is our net effect on others. And that is the true measure of the exceptional. That you can be a little league coach, you can be a singer, you can crossing guard literally 3 blocks from my house, where every day those kids hug the crossing guard because she just loves those kids. There's your exceptional. But it's demonstrable always through behavior. And that's what a lot of people don't get, that to be exceptional, it has to be demonstrable through behaviors that positively influence others.
How much of skill, how much of excellence then is habit? And did you happen to look up within the book excellence relevant to genetics?
Yeah, good question. So, I looked at everything both from a biological standpoint, but also from a social standpoint. And what really stood out for me, whether I was looking at indigenous tribes, for instance, in the Amazon, or in the poor areas of Bogota, Colombia, or in other parts of the world, what stood out for me is that they were able to achieve a certain amount with what nature gave them, right? Now, most of us can run, but most of us are not going to be Usain Bolt. And I don't strive to be Usain Bolt. I want to be able to chase a ball, and that's about it. Play with a dog and so forth. So there are limits. We have to be realistic about what is acceptable. But one of the things that I talk about was I was talking to this. I mean, everybody's young to me now. I was talking to this young man who we were listening on the radio, and he was talking. We were listening to about this runner from I think it was either Tanzania or Ethiopia, and he had just won the one of the marathons, and he says, "I came from that tribe." And I was fascinated by that. He's studying in California at graduate school, and I go, "Wow, that's really cool." And then I started thinking, why is it that so many the greatest runners in long distance runners come from that area of East Africa? And and I said, well, and I just benign curiosity. Chris knows this, this is great. And I said, why do you think this is so? I said, is it the food? Is it the altitude? Is it the genetics that everybody talks about? And the guy thought for a minute, and we were driving as we were listening to the radio, and he said, when we were kids, we didn't have news. And I go, well, what does that have to do with anything? And he says, we didn't know what records were. We didn't know what 26 kilometer was. We just ran and we ran and we ran. There was no imposition of rules and restrictions, and you only have to go this far. And so we would run from village to village to village to village and back. And nobody ever said, don't do it that fast, or rest in between, or why don't you have some Gatorade while you're at it? We just ran and ran and ran. Now, there may be some truth to that. Maybe that's just his thinking. But I have to honor what he says, that these kids grow up and they just run. In the same way that in favelas of Brazil, from the time you're 2, you have a soccer ball attached to your foot and you're kicking it around. And how do you get a Pele? Nobody tells you have to go to the park to play. You just play wherever you're at. And so I think the dispelling these self-made impositions and getting rid of these restrictions has a lot to do with that you can craft your future no matter what you're handed. And of course there's going to be limits. But look at Benjamin Franklin, who gets out of school at age 6 or 7, or 6th grade, and travels from Philadelphia to Boston, or reverse. I forget now. And with pennies in his pocket, learns to run a printing press from his brother. And grows on to invent things and become a great scientist. How do you become a Benjamin Franklin? There's no school that you can go to. Yeah. There's no university in the United States that can teach you to do everything that Benjamin Franklin did. Postmaster. He's the guy that discovered, the Gulf Stream. And he did that just by being curious. He was wondering, why is it that when I'm on the ocean sailing to England, the water isn't frozen, but the rivers are? And so he started dipping a thermometer in the water every hour. And he figured out, oh, this water's coming from Florida. This is in the 1700s. Tell me what university was teaching that? None of them. And that's the thing, is he took what he was given, natural curiosity, mastery over himself, and then he used those keen observational skills to both innovate but to also observe other people, which served him well. For instance, when he was America's first ambassador to France.
What an interesting, I mean, I think we all know about Benjamin Franklin. We do learn about him in school, but what an interesting way to look at his life story. Kind of never looked at that in that angle, that his curiosity was his university.
It was, but he also apprenticed himself. He, in his writings, you can see, and I think I've read about 7 or 8 books on him, where he studied the best behaviors of others, so that he wasn't going to reinvent the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to use that which served others well, and then copied that. And it was his ability to observe that served him so well as our America's first diplomat to France, which we needed to counter the threat from England when we declared independence from King George. And he was able to convince the French through his understanding. You talk about human hacking. You talk about being able to be persuasive.
Yeah.
The French were looking at him and saying, you represent a country that's is only a country for the last 8 months, and we are supposed to go to war for you.
Right.
And he convinced them because he understood the French. He understood their nonverbals. He mirrored their nonverbals. When the first thing he did when he got to France was he got rid of all his clothes, and I'm going to dress like the French.
Did he? I did not know that.
Absolutely. Eventually he was able to bring out his the cap and some of his things, but the French loved him because he understood the nuance of French society, that no work was done before 11 o'clock in the morning, that most of the best diplomacy was conducted, in fact, in the salons of France, which were at night in a very collegial setting. And he mastered that. And that's how he got the French to back us up, because he understood. I mean, you talk about the world's first really big influencer and the world's first big hacker.
Yeah.
He has no equal.
That I had not known that part of the story. And what a great example, because we oftentimes talk about pretexting, which is just what you said, getting those clothes on, going there, learning the way they speak, learning their customs. That makes everyone feel very comfortable with you. What a great example of excellence, and tying it into something that our listeners can be like, wow, that makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah. And he wasn't a perfect French speaker, but he tried, but he understood, how to make people really comfortable around him. If you go to France, you go to Paris, right down in the downtown, right across from the Eiffel Tower, there's a statue of Benjamin Franklin. And the reason that he's there is because they loved him. Now, the second ambassador to arrive, he didn't fit in so well. So it makes a big difference when we mirror each other. But how do we mirror each other, right? How do we negotiate? You've got to be able to read the people in front of you. You have to be able to draw accurate inferences. Something so simple as, I mean, the big question that being asked now is, hey, when everybody goes back to work, what's going to be different? I'll tell you what's going to be different. People are going to still be standing further apart. Some people will question the efficacy of shaking hands. Maybe the bro hug will be still out a year from now. I mean, we'll get back to it, but there will be differences, but you won't know them, and you won't have what Daniel Goleman calls that social intelligence unless you can observe it. And so that's a big part And so there's a huge chapter which goes in depth into how to observe the world around you and what to do with it, and how to improve observation skills, because it is a skill set.
You answered the question I was going to ask. That is awesome. So it comes out June 24th.
9th.
29th.
June
Yes.
29th. You can get it at any bookstore, obviously Amazon, it will be there.
Right.
And I think it's going to be another, well, not to play on words, I think it's going to be an exceptional book from what I've read so far. So thank you for taking your 40 years of experience and putting it into something that the layperson can use.
Well, I'm grateful for this opportunity, and I'm grateful that there are a lot of people who have found these books useful. And I will say this: give it a try. Just give it a try. If it just improves even one or two things, I think it's worthwhile. And we all need improvement.
Amen.
I know you work on it, Maxie works on it, I work on it.
Yeah.
And it's a chore, but I think it makes us better human beings. And the last time we had your conference in Orlando, you could really see what it means to care and to be empathetic and to share knowledge, and that's all part of being exceptional.
I love it. Joe, we always ask a couple questions at the end, but first, where can people find out more information about you and the book and everything we talked about today?
They can just go to joenavarro.net, and there's links there for training, books, everything. So that's probably the easiest place.
Perfect. And we'll have all the links in the show notes for your Body Language Academy, for the media section on your JN Forensics book, and a link to your Twitter, so people can go and follow you at any one of those to find out what you're doing next. What is the next thing that Joe Navarro is going to do? You will know.
Well, thank you. And, I do try to answer most questions people ask on Twitter. So it's a good place.
See
to
that
find
you are
them.
very active on Twitter, which is great. So a couple closing questions. Favorite books. Give us it doesn't have to be a long list. It could be 1, 2, whatever. Just it doesn't have to be about the topic we talked about today. Just a book that you say, man, every person should look at this book.
Yeah, definitely. The Giving Tree. It's a children's book, but every adult should read it. If you have children going to college, definitely The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker.
Yes.
If you want to really read about a heroic woman who, during World War I, really dominated the area of the Middle East and crafted what the Middle East, to a certain extent, looks like. I love the books about Gertrude Bell, but in particular the one called The Desert Queen. This woman was tough. I mean, she went headlong into the Middle East, into Arabia, and befriended everybody, and used every technique that you teach, that both of you teach, which is really interesting for her day. She was a contemporary of T. Lawrence. And the one book that I read over and over is The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyers. And of course, the only book I think that I've read 6 or 7 times is Herodotus, The Histories, the father of, So
that is quite a list. Thank you. I wrote them all down. There is now more that needs to go on my to read shelf. Thanks a lot.
Well, I've been at it a lot longer than you have. So
Yes, just
yeah.
a little, just a couple years.
Yeah.
Okay, Joe. Now, we like to ask this question because it's always something that helps us reflect. But your greatest mentors in your life, who would you count as some of your greatest people that you looked up to or learned the most from?
I mean, without question, my family, mom and dad, my grandma, extremely influential. Yeah, I am truly their product. I mean, there's so many people that just somehow helped along the way. They're just so numerous. I can't really cite any particular individual because there's so many. You know, I learned to write from Jack Schaefer. I've learned about human hacking from you guys. I've borrowed a lot from David Givens, who's been patient with me for the last 30 years, mentoring me. Gerald Post, who was the chief psychiatrist for the CIA, who mentored me years back. There's just been so many. When you say, well, I've stood on the shoulders of giants. Well, I don't think I've stood on the shoulders of giants. I've tried to crawl on their shoulders. I've tried to hang on. But yeah, I think they all shaped me in some way, and I was glad. I was glad I was able to do that.
We had Jack on our podcast, and he also is a big fan of you.
Yeah, Jack's a great guy, and he's made a lot of contributions to, the unit we were in was very small. It was truly the most elite unit in the FBI. There were 6 agents selected out of 12,500, and it wasn't just that a lot of eyes were on us. It's that the director's eyes were on us, and it was tough. It was tough because we, a lot of things were not pleasant, including when we had to investigate our own FBI agents who unfortunately had been cooperating with hostile intelligence services. So, yeah, I always give thanks for everybody that I've learned from.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Joe, I cannot thank you enough. It's always a pleasure talking to you, but it's always great to just learn from you, and I cannot wait for this book to come out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for coming today and being part of the show yet again. So let's see, what do we got coming up? Well, we'll have all the links in the show notes, so you guys can check that out. And next time on the Human Element series, we'll be joined by handwriting expert Teresa Abram. Yeah, she's fascinating. I went on her podcast and she told me things that I didn't think people would be able to tell me about myself with handwriting. Felt like witchcraft, but it will be interesting to talk to her and see how she does what she does and learn from her too. Just check out all the links there for social-engineer.org. It is brand new. If you haven't seen it, we just launched the site, so everything is new and improved there, as well as social-engineer.com and the Innocent Lives Foundation at innocentlivesfoundation.org. Thank you for joining us this month on the show, and we will see you next month. See ya.